Thank you, Rod, and thank you, Stuart. I feel very privileged and honoured to have been asked to share tonight. As I was preparing, I was reflecting that it's probably very appropriate that I'm here in Newcastle tonight sharing this. This is actually the first time I have shared my story about coming out as a gay man in a public meeting scenario. I have made some references in preaching in my church once or twice, but I've not actually talked about it before. It's a process I've been undertaking. Can I just take a moment to do that? Then I'll feel more relaxed and comfortable. And it's a process I've been undertaking for about the last 3 years, starting initially with my immediate family and my closest friends, and then extending last year to my extended family and to all of my friends. And it's fitting that I share this here tonight because it was actually in this city nearly 30 years ago when I was living here, attending Broadmeadow Boys High School in Forms 1 and Form 2 and Year 9, so that says something about when I was at school. And just living down the road here in Turnbull Street, Merriweather, my father was working with the with the railways, whatever they were called then, and as an engineer. And it was while I was living here in that time that I actually first discovered that I was sexually attracted to men. And so, you know, tonight's a significant moment for me to be able to share about Stuart's book. As Rod said, I've been asked to share with you how it's helped me. It has been a major contributor in my journey and a significant part. But I thought to kind of understand that really, first a little bit of background about who I am and what my journey has been would, you know, help to put that helpfulness into context. And so I just gave you a little bit of history in terms of like the general history of LGBTI rights and acceptance. I started to realise I was gay about 3 years before the first Sydney Mardi Gras, about 9 years before homosexuality was decriminalised in this state. So it wasn't the hardest of times to realise you're a gay person. You know, the police had stopped trying to entrap gay men and actively pursuing them to, you know, drag them through the courts. But at the same time, it wasn't the easiest either, because our society was still quite homophobic. And then when we add into that, I wasn't just, you know, a teenage boy realising that I was gay. I was actually a Christian teenage boy realising that I was gay. And I don't mean, you know, a teenage boy who was being dragged along to church by his parents, unwillingly being made to go. I'm talking about seriously committed, born-again, praying, Bible-reading, evangelical Christian 13-year-old. You know, I was seriously committed in my relationship with God. I kind of think my heritage is a little bit like, you know, Paul describes himself as a Jew of the Jews and a Pharisee of the Pharisees. Well, I kind of think my heritage is a little bit like an evangelical of the evangelicals and a born-again Christian of the born-again Christians. All four of my grandparents got saved into the Salvation Army, and my mother's parents were Salvation Army pastors. And I did just try and check with my mother actually via SMS just before I came in, and she hasn't confirmed, but I have a feeling her mother actually before she got married, may have been a Salvation Army pastor here in Adamstown when they used to have a Salvation Army corps here a long time ago. She died a couple of years ago at 100, so we're talking a long time ago. So all four of my grandparents were in the Salvation Army. My parents are actively involved in Salvation Army leadership, have been since I was, you know, since I first became aware, and still are. And so you can imagine that this was going to be a struggle at this time in history and given my background. And it became what consumed my life for the next 35 years. I wanted to be a Christian, but at the same time I desired to connect intimately and sexually with men, and in those days there was no intersection. You were either gay or you were Christian. So I don't really need to kind of go into too much detail, I don't think. You know, a number of you would have taken this journey yourself who are here tonight. But what happened for me was that life kept presenting me with circumstances that helped me to make choices to reinforce my Christian side, hopefully believing that somehow the gay side would submit itself to the doctrine of progressive sanctification that I'd learned about as a young Salvation Army man. And, I was almost ready to accept myself as a gay man while I was studying at university, but then I met someone who was involved in the charismatic movement and in Pentecostal churches, and he was testifying about having been healed of homosexuality and how the power of God had changed everything, and I thought, wow, here's the answer I'm looking for. And so then a little later I started teaching at a Christian school, and I met a lady who became my wife for 23 years, and then as part of our journey together I revealed my struggle to the church leadership of the church I was involved in, and of course, I needed to be put through disciplinary action because I'd been involving myself in sin. And then the ex-gay ministry thing happened for me. I put myself through a few courses, both the Living Waters course and a Cy Rogers course, and personal counselling, it feels like, for all of my life. And then eventually became a pastor myself when I kind of felt maybe I was ready. And my wife and I pastored a church for 7 years. So I think you get the picture. This was a conflict. And when I finally faced the fact that my sexual orientation wasn't going to change, because if anyone had put the effort in, I'd put it in. It wasn't going to change, so what's the future going to hold? And I needed to start taking steps to living openly as a gay man. So, enter to Stage Centre comes Stuart's book. A friend of mine who wasn't even a Christian, found it via the gay press, I think, in Sydney, bought me a copy. It was an advance copy before it was even released, and I devoured it over that Christmas holidays. And two things came out of that book for me in particular. The first thing was that Sigmund Freud's theories were never proved, just proposed. And that was like suddenly the whole foundation. I'd already arrived at the conclusion for myself that the ex-gay ministry school had based their philosophies on Freud's theories. With due respect, I love the church, I'm still involved in the church, but my observation is the church tends to accept the science once it's about 100 years old. And so Freud was safe then, And so, I hadn't realised that those theories were not proven. And, in Freud's defence, in those days, they didn't empirically test like they do now, but the fact is they weren't. And so suddenly the rug was pulled out underneath of the foundation of what I had been taught to believe. And then right on the heels of that, I read about the research work of Evelyn Hooker. And if there's ever a woman gay people should praise God for, it's Evelyn Hooker. Because she did research, I don't know how many have read the book, but she did research that actually took on the street normal gay men and compared them to on the street normal heterosexual men. She matched them identically in terms of IQ and education and occupations and these types of things, and put them all through the standard mental health tests that the psychoanalysts did, and sent them off to all the psychoanalysts, the leading psychoanalysts around the United States. And those psychoanalysts were not able to tell which of the pair was gay and which of the pair was heterosexual. And that was it. For me, that was game, set and match. That was, must say something about my innate respect for science, despite a couple of sermons that I would like to be able to retract from when I was a pastor. That was it. It was like, you know what? I've been believing a lie. And the lie was that I was somehow psychologically and emotionally, lacking in development because I was sexually attracted to men. And those two facts alone, let alone the multitude of other fantastic pieces of information you're going to find in the book, and if you haven't bought it and read it yet, you must. In fact, it was so what's the word I want? Important. I can't find the word I'm looking for. So important in my own journey that I bought a copy for my parents, who are still actively involved in the Salvation Army, my 3 brothers, 2 of whom are actively involved in the church. And I explained some of this material in a letter I sent out last year to my extended family and friends. And it is a foundational, important work. And I think what Stuart has contributed at this time in the journey for LGBTI people, and especially those of faith, is so important that it kind of defies description, really. But for me, January last year, I actually had a bad back at the time, lying on the couch, unable to move, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to finish this book. And it changed my life. Thank you, Stuart.